It's almost been a year since South Korea's Itaewon tragedy, which resulted in a huge decrease in foot traffic and put a significant burden on local businesses. Have things returned to what they used to be? Let's turn to Professor Bae So-young this morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Professor, it's been a year, like I said, since the tragic incident took place in Central Seoul. Now, what has the past year been like, especially for business in that area?
Well, it's been an extremely challenging year for all the businesses in Itaewon for the past year. So there's been a significant drop in customers and tourists in the areas, resulting in reduced revenue for local businesses. So some shops had to temporarily shut down, and also others also faced financial hardships due to the decreased foot traffic. So especially such challenges severely impacted like local bars and pubs. So while there used to be lots of Korean customers before, but now there are much more foreigners compared to Korean citizens. So it seems like Korean people still feel hesitant to visit those Itaewon area due to their emotional reluctance.
Right, it was definitely a hub for both locals and foreigners. Then what's it like now? Because I remember the area, even the surrounding area, being completely emptied out. How are things now then?
Yeah, so after the incident, the entire area was literally emptied out for a while. But since then, the government and businesses and some artist groups, sometimes like non-government organizations, and some of the citizens have been really working so hard to recreate some energy and vibrance in the Itaewon and gain its reputation back. So in a wish to attract more people to revisit this area, many cultural events, performances, or exhibitions were organized as well. So now, especially during the weekend season, so it seems like many people get together in this Itaewon area again, just like before. And there are even long lines in front of the popular restaurants. But the thing is, during the weekdays, the number of visitors is quite limited. So it's still at about 60% compared to the previous year. And the general atmosphere is not quite the same as before. Some business owners, they feel really hopeless and say that this seems to be actually their new normal, which they really need to get used to. So many shops still rely on substantial amount of loans to survive throughout this challenging period of recovery.
Sure, the liveliness in the area is not as lively, but slowly recovering, it sounds like. Now, such tragedies are not unique to South Korea, I have to say. Things like this have happened around the world, and communities and businesses have managed to survive and get back on their feet, right? Could you provide any examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So tragic incidents have occurred in many parts of the world society. And one of the examples was actually terrorist attack in the French city of Nice back in 2016. So after the attack, the number of visitors actually sharply dropped after the event, and all the businesses were so much devastated. But the government put all the effort to ensure the security measures and initiated cultural and tourism events to rebuild their city and reposition themselves. So now Nice has become a popular tourist destination once again. And another example would be back in 2019 and 20, there was a big bushfire in Australia. It was a natural disaster. And while valuable cultural heritage and natural areas were all burnt due to this fire, so it inspired Australians to launch their own initiative, their own community-driven campaigns to encourage people to go back to those impacted area. And they got to pay even more attention to wildlife conservation and local protection again too. So depending on the nature and the scale of the accident, the recovery period may differ, but in most of the cases, impact has been eased, in terms of the number of tourists or visitors within 2 to 3 years after the incident, based on the strong resilience of the whole community.
Sure. Professor Bae, you've mentioned how there were events organized by non-government organizations. And what is it that those businesses in Itaewon need the most to fully return to where they were before? Is it that type of activities or events? What is it?
Well, I think the two primary supports will be needed. So first, absolutely like financial support. So just like when the pandemic occurred, like business owners, they would feel really frustrated since the whole situation seemed to be so unsure. So to keep their businesses, they would need like short-term and long-term financial support. And second of all, it is important to drive kind of a campaign to reposition this area to drive more visitors back. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this incident should be completely forgotten. So in history, like all events that have occurred become a part of the identity of that region, and also it holds significant messages. So while keeping this kind of lessons learned from this incident, the region would need to be promoted in a very creative way with the whole community.
That's great. So financial aid and also keeping the identity that the place has held. All right, Professor Bae, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.